Hi everyone, this is Akeem from Sami Arts. I'm interviewing out of Marshall Athletes, one of the owners, Carmichael, nicknamed Kid, Simon.
Yes, sir.
He is a very passionate individual, and I think what you'll find is that he is a person who believes in passion and
Absolutely.
artistic and bringing the beauty. So, I mean, can you tell us where you're from? Tell us like we don't know who you are.
No, absolutely. Born and raised in Annapolis, Maryland, outskirts of Washington, D.C., Baltimore area. I was not a midshipman. I was not, I did not grow up in a military background. Just family grew up in Maryland, and that's where I got my roots martial arts from.
Wow. And so with martial arts, what specific art did you study?
I started with Taekwondo at the age of 5 years old, and it was more of ITF forms.
What is ITF?
ITF would be more the Chunji International Taekwondo Federation. So that was not the Page forms that you would see on the Olympic style WTF, World Taekwondo Federation. So it would be the difference between the Korean styles per se. But that's how I started martial arts in Taekwondo. And then first flyer came up on the board. There was competition in Baltimore, and so happened that we went to the tournament. The school I was with didn't really promote much tournaments, but it was an opportunity to see where my skills compared to other athletes out there, and I just got hooked to the competition. And by the age of 12 years old, 13 years old, I met world champion Charlie Lee, and trained under him as my forms choreographer, and began my journey as a national forms competitor with NASCA in 1990. From there, it was very nice because I was able to spend time and learn from Grandmaster Junri, and travel with him in 1994 to the former Soviet Union to bring martial arts ballet into former Russia. And that was an amazing experience. I was very young at the time, but Grandmaster had a vision, and Grandmaster bringing martial arts ballet and utilizing the aspects of traditional forms into musical forms of martial ballet, and being able to bridge the East and the West through choreography of martial arts and dance was probably one of the most monumental times of my life, especially as a young teenager.
Wow. And with Junrei, I imagine you probably did his daily 100.
I did
but I
the
noticed
100. I did the 100. I did the belt on the small belt and the side kick drills. I've done anything and everything that Grandmaster Reed needed to make sure that martial arts ballet, his philosophy and Trutopia, will continue as a legacy, not only through our sport, but through our art and our philosophy as American freestyle martial artists.
So with ballet, and this is interesting because this makes me think of something else that I saw about Junrei. He was one of the first people to actually introduce music, like classical music,
Yes.
to forms.
Absolutely.
Was that something you were part of?
That was part of that little thing too. Grandmaster Reed, obviously the first forms that he choreographed to was Exodus and Beethoven. And those were very beautiful lyrical pieces that he presented to the industry. And from there, it became about our national anthems, Star Spangled Banner, our national anthem. And, that is where he was able, being from the Baltimore, Washington, D.C. area, he was able to open up his franchises and support the business aspects of short-term and long-term goals with belt ranking systems, create the business structures of franchises. Obviously, we know of him as the innovator of safety equipment and supporting Bruce Lee and teaching him and Muhammad Ali. But ultimately, all that transpires to give back to Congress, can give back to our government system, and to be able to give back the philosophies of the 7 qualities of a champion that he always teaches, which are power and posture, quickness, timing, endurance, flexibility, and balance.
Wow. And so it sounds like not only the musical aspects, but the aspects of the larger role of being a part of the community seem to be ingrained.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and it was very much ingrained. Even though in the 70s, 60s and 70s, it was about fighting. 80s was about, kickboxing, right? It became a little bit more sanctioned with safety equipment, and musical forms came about, and that's why you'd see Jim Abernathy Sports, Battle of Atlanta, hosted by Joe Corley, and it was the forms challenges with Charlie Lee, Keith Harabayashi, and Jean Fournette, and in between those fights were Billy Blanks and Tony Young, and it was also the PKA fighters, and it was a festivity. It was an event. It is what we know now of bringing UFC and America's Best Dance Crew and The Voice all together.
Wow.
That's what, if you think about it in that aspect, that was how we used to sell out crowds.
That's so exciting. And so I guess I can see the marketing aspects that I didn't really realize to that. I guess in that area, marketing was a big deal. But let's also look at when you joined Team Paul Mitchell.
Yes.
Now, who is Team Paul Mitchell for those uninformed?
Team Paul Mitchell, fortunately, he fell in love. John Paul DiGiorio fell in love with the philosophies of martial arts. I had the opportunity to, be part of Team Paul Mitchell through the coach of, Don Rodriguez and Steve Babcock, and those gentlemen gave me the opportunity as an adult to represent Team Paul Mitchell. At the time, there was no, in the 90s, or say early 90s, there were no juniors on the circuit at that time that represented Team Paul Mitchell. It's not until most recently that you'll see high-end athletes being sponsored. So my first year as an adult, I had the opportunity to be with Team Paul Mitchell, and it was an amazing experience. Prior to that, I was with Team Metro All-Stars, and that was also an amazing experience as well. I was able to be sponsored as a junior at the age of 13, 14 years old. That was able to allow me to compete, obviously nationally, with NBL and NASCA at the time, primarily NASCA, but it allowed me to compete and hone my craft as a junior as well.
Wow, and so the musical aspects of when you'd worked with Grandmaster Junior A,
Yes.
did that actually introduced you to the musical kata aspects of things, yes?
Absolutely. Yes.
And that allowed you to innovate, from what I understand.
Absolutely. I learned most of my, actually it's funny because most of my choreography comes out of Oakland, California as a dancer. As a martial artist, what I was able to learn were the techniques. Refining techniques, understanding precision, understanding lines. It was, obviously there was known forms, Twilight Zone from Charlie Lee, or Beethoven's Fifth Symphony from Master John Chung, or, Grandmaster Ree's Exodus. So, I learned the forms and forms and choreography. However, it was a model of classical music. Obviously, things were shifting in the 90s, and we got more, at the time, house and trance music and dance hall music at the time. So that's when we were able to start, I wouldn't say choreographing music, but the high energy aspect was coming into play. I would say also that's the time when, Billy Blanks presented Taibo. So there's a lot of high energy movement happening in the 90s era. But I would say with regards to real choreography and real aspects of staging and working with other artists was definitely when I took my time off as a competitor. And I left the circuit in 1996, and I did not return to martial arts until 2005. So I left hiatus and learned how to dance. And I've always wanted to learn. I was unfortunately doing martial arts my entire life. I knew movement was my piece, and it was about being a visual instrument, and how could I use my martial arts ability to transcend that into what we know of now as tricking, or what we know as groove, which is combining, freestyle dance into martial arts. But I believe, as a b-boy, as a martial artist, we all come together with one commonality, which is the Shaolin, and that is, or even Wu-Tang Clan. We all come and we're inspired by the aspects of watching 70s kung fu flicks, and I believe that's where, as we all know, 80s b-boys and breakers came about. We had the elements of hip-hop come about in the 90s, and we were able to utilize the aspects of music and aspects of movement to bridge this all together with the philosophy of martial arts.
Wow. And so I noticed that this bridging effect seems to bring a lot of people from a lot of different walks of life together
Absolutely.
to do one thing all at the same time. And it's almost like everyone has this balancing match of they're balancing all these disciplines.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's why we, to be a master of your craft is going to take, obviously, as they say, 10,000 hours or 10 years. So you live a life. That's why you call martial arts a lifetime journey, because you don't have to stay with one style. Everything is an art. The way you look at someone's movement, by the way they articulate, by the way that they film, by the way they texturize editing, or even sound bites. Anything and everything acoustically and visually and through touch and sound is really what we learn through our journey of martial arts, to really be in tune, physically, and spiritually,
And it all
mentally. It all
comes through.
comes together holistically.
Wow. I heard you got on a couple of credit cards as well. You were
I
like the
did.
first.
That was a funny story. So I had a friend. He actually had a team. His name is Brian Anderson, great friend of mine. And his first business, actually, coming out of high school, he took a year off, and he opened up his a credit card business. He was able to get an Infinity MasterCard, and I was able to be a silhouette of the first martial arts credit card from MasterCard. And that was it was interesting because you think about the financial structure that Grandmaster Junri brought, and that was so ahead of its time now. And you think about affinity football cards or affinity baseball cards, you get your logos on things. That was the predecessor of all that in the mid-90s.
Wow, really interesting. So let's go into your latest program. Now, this is connecting with the reason why you're in Martial Athletes.
Yes.
Now, this is a merged venture. You were a part of Team Paul Mitchell. Now, there's someone else that was a part of Team Gypsy,
Yes.
Chad Cannon, which you'll probably see in the earlier part of my feed there, an interview. You'll see a little bit more information about him hopefully shortly. But how did you two meet?
I was actually at Lone Star Open, moved here to the Austin area in 2010 from the Bay area, Silicon Valley. And my first competition I went to, I saw Chad compete in men's forms. This guy's, he's local, he's got talent. There's going to be a time, there's going to be a moment that I get the opportunity to meet him. Very humble. I love his martial arts ethics. I think that's the most important thing, is the ethics of the martial arts, not just the physical quality of the martial arts and the athleticism. And I had the opportunity to bring him in as one of my stunt guys for a mocap show that we do out in Austin with Rooster Teeth Productions called Red vs. Blue. And he ended up coming in, and I was able to work with him. During that time, we obviously built a relationship and collaborated. I would watch him, in his tournament circuit, and represent Team Gypsy. And there was a day, probably in 2016, I was like, what do you want to do? What do you want to do for the rest of your life? He goes, well, I want to, have a degree. I compete. I want to produce. I want to have a school. And it probably wasn't until a year after that, around, during that year, we talked, and it wasn't until about 4 months later that we were able to obtain a facility in March of 2017 and start our program together. And it was nice because we both have a very strong choreography background with regards to forms. He does still do some level of high-end tricking. He is a point fighter. He does have a degree, which I love, because I obviously have a business information degree, and he has a sports science degree, so it merges very well.
Wow. Well, thank you very much for explaining how you guys all come together. I want to ask more information, maybe at another time, also about the REACH program and how you are working with youth and doing things and changing things. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. This is Akeem of Sami Arts. This is part 2 of the interview we're interviewing Team Gypsy. What is that? Who is Team Gypsy? Who is Chad Cannon? You've seen him in one of our previous videos, and here he is today. Hi, Chad.
How's it going, y'all? Of course, my name is Chad Cannon. So, for some of you guys that don't know me, a little brief background about myself is I've been practicing martial arts for, probably over 23, 24 years now. I've been practicing the majority of my whole life, basically. I started when I was about 6.5, 7 years old. And the reason I started, honestly, was because my older brother started. So it was kind of one of those things that the younger brother wanted to be just like the older brother. And I thought martial arts was cool. And I started kicking around. And probably like after the first few months, I really started to figure out, man, I'm kind of good at this, I was always athletic. I played in all kinds of different other sports, but martial arts, it didn't come to me to where it was too hard. And I started falling a little bit more in love with it. I wasn't really one of the kids that was like in love with all of the Ninja Turtles and the Power Rangers. Of course, I liked them. I was more of a Mortal Kombat type of guy. I liked to where the guys could go off to different worlds and compete and fight against each other. I always thought that stuff was really, really cool, which was kind of like my supernatural inspiration to martial arts. But what really sparked me to get into competing was, I'd say probably about like a year in, I was doing basketball and baseball, all of the typical sports that kids usually do, and I got that final kind of decision that my mom and dad made me make. It was like, Chad, do you either want to play select baseball or do you want to pursue martial arts and competition? Because that's when I first had started to compete, and that was actually after one of my first tournaments where I had won a big trophy. It was taller than me. And I compared my baseball trophy, which was this big, to my karate trophy, which was this big, which I won because I punched somebody and I got points. And I thought that was super cool. I could actually hit somebody and score points and win a tournament and get trophies. That really, really inspired me. From there, that's where like my competitive edge of martial arts took off.
Wow.
I'd say that was probably like 1997.
97?
Going into 1998 is when I, started doing like my first state tournaments through the AOK.
What is the AOK?
AOK? AOK is Amateur Organization of Karate. So that's basically, our local Texas martial arts organization, which, back when I was competing, it was one of the biggest organizations in Texas, not if, it may have been within the whole United States. That's where all the schools came to compete. So that's a little bit where I started my competition. And from there, after that 1997 state championship, I lost, and I learned a lot from that, and I wanted to continue to compete and shoot for that state title. And I'd say about 1997, when I was about, like, say 7, going on towards 8, is where I really started getting the spark to compete, and not just compete, but compete to win. That's where, like, that mindset shifted. And then from there, it really took off. Every weekend I was going to tournaments, I was winning, I was getting trophies, and I was like, man, this is maybe something I could really do. Then, of course, I was maturing in the curriculum and on the traditional side of martial arts. And for me, if many of you guys don't know, I came up in Junri Taekwondo. So that's like martial arts ballet. Which was brought to the United States by Master Junri. So that's the system that I came up in. So a little bit more flashier. We did the music to forms, musical forms, and more of the flashier techniques, which was kind of cool to me as well. I got to learn like the flying side kicks and the jumping kicks. And for some of you guys that know me for jumping or doing flips, one of my original instructors was Bubba Dyke. And he started sending me videos and giving me videos of the U.S. Open Karate Tournament. So if a lot of you guys have never heard of U.S. Open, it's one of the biggest martial arts tournaments, sport martial arts tournaments in the United States, if not the world. And he'd always give me these tapes, all right? And on these tapes would be people like Carmichael Simon, or there'd be people like the John Valeri's of the world, or the Mike Chatterata Butts, or going more towards my generations, the Steve Taradas and the Matt Emmicks and the Raymond Daniels. And I used to see these guys, and they were out of this world competitors. And my instructor would always tell me, Chad, you can do that same thing. You can do the same thing. You're just as good. And I believed him. So that's when I started changing up all my katas, doing all the flashy kicks and tricks and adding and implementing those. And I kind of feel like within Texas, I was one of the first innovators to actually start doing a lot of like the more flashier type of katas, because I was taking those techniques from what I saw. So now this is going more towards me getting towards my black belt and shifting away from competition. We can go back to like morally how martial arts changed my life. And I would say...
Well, right before you do, I'd like to ask you another question.
Yes, sir.
So you were a part of Team Gypsy. Are you still a part of that team?
I am part of Team Gypsy. So I've been a part of several different, well, 2 teams, honestly, to tell you the truth. The first team was, after I got my black belt, I got onto Team GOP, which that stands for Galio's Oil Patch. So GOP was a national karate team that competed on the NBL circuit, National Black Belt League. Now, the only way for me to do that was I had to win the Golden Greek, which was the AOK's like kind of highest honor award for adult and junior competitors. My parents were like, you got to win this first before you go and compete all over the world. I won that. I got on Team GOP. That was the first national karate team that I was on. I was on that for a year until they started fully sponsoring me. They said the only way we're going to fully sponsor, which means flights, hotel, food, tournament registration, uniforms, I had to win a world title. So it took me a whole year after being on the team to win a world title. I got the world title, and I competed on that team for almost like 8 or 9 years, actually, until I graduated and went to college, and the team kind of dispersed. After that team dispersed, I pursued college football. I still competed, but I didn't necessarily have a team. That's where I met up with the Team Gypsy guys. So originally, Team Gypsy, it was a local, just a school karate team. Okay, it started out of the ASK organization, which is Austin Society Karate. They had a couple of students that were competing on the local circuit and international circuit, and they put a team together called Gypsy. And Gypsy was actually inspired after the Gypsy Kings band, if you guys know who they are.
Yeah.
So our team manager, his name is Gil Urias. What he basically did, he's like, man, I have my favorite band, I got my kids, I just want to take them around. And we had a sponsor, which is Gil and Ralph Urias' sister owned the glass company. So they sponsored the majority of our tournaments. And that started, I'd say I got onto Team Gypsy in about 2007. And the funny thing is when I first got introduced to the guys, like, I knew Chance Turner because, we're about the same age. He's one of my best friends, and we always used to compete together. But I started training those guys first before I even got on the team. I was doing seminars and going and training the guys for point fighting and flips. And they were like, Chad, we'd love for you to be on the team. We got money to sponsor. Would you do it? And I was like, yeah, I'll do it, And
so you had an interesting backing. It sounds like you had, I've heard you say you had familial support from the very beginning. They were saying in order for you to get here, you had a lot of support to getting to the next level.
Well, it was like that with all my journey through martial arts. So before I even got to competing on the national level, even before I got to black belt, one of my big things when I was a kid, I was a booger, man. I used to get in trouble all the time. Almost every week, the principal's calling, talking about Chad never sits down in class, Chad doing backflips in the hallway,
So
Chad
familiar.
punched this kid, Chad did this. And actually, my martial arts instructor worked at the school as a special ed teacher. So what happened was, a couple of times things would slide. He'd hear about things, and my parents would be pretty disciplinary as well. But it got to the point to where martial arts meant so much to me that if you took it away, it was going to affect me. So what my martial arts instructor said was 1 year before I got my black belt, he said, no trouble. That means that, getting to the principal's office, I'm checking in with your teacher every week, all your teachers. If you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, no black belt. And that's what really changed my life as a kid. I learned that I had to be disciplined, and I had to stay disciplined to earn something that really meant something to me. Because I was the kid that, I'd practice, and I'd go home, and I'd practice in my karate room until my parents kicked me out and made me go to sleep. So when my instructor told me I couldn't test for my black belt if I didn't get in trouble, I had to overcome that. So that was like the first step. And then, like you're saying, everything were stepping stones. But I know you had mentioned a little bit how I've applied that to my life
Yeah,
physically.
and I noticed the
and
Team
mentally.
Gypsy. I'm noticing that your martial arts instructor was in the community. He was in the school where you spend a lot of our kids spend a lot of our time developing themselves.
Yes.
And he was right there, or she was right there, and that they were there to influence you toward
Yes.
making a big stance in your life, toward being a part of the community by showing you that example that he was a part of the community. It seems like he also showed you discipline and how to give others discipline through something that's important to them and helping them grow it.
Yes. Yeah. So that was a big thing. Even when I started in teaching, I started teaching pretty young. I'd say I was teaching kids private lessons probably like 11, 12 years old, 13 years old from there. And I teach like the competition side, and then I really started teaching more curriculum-based classes and working with like the smaller kids. I'd say like when I started getting into like 9th and 10th grade, and that's when it kind of flipped. I still have my competitive mindset, but then I started creating the mindset of an instructor as well, and also putting myself in the shoes of the young kids that struggled in school, that may have been labeled with having ADHD or attention deficit. They tried to say all that stuff about me, but honestly, it all comes down to discipline, and honestly, it comes down to someone understanding where you are at that time in your life, and I feel like I could relate to a lot of kids.
Wow.
Um,
And it sounds like you were tested.
Yeah.
You were tested into growing.
yes.
And you had that instructor that was right there with you.
Mm-hmm.
And not only did he show care for you by showing you instructions how to defend yourself, but he inspired you to really take it to another level.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, he inspired me. And it's crazy. I look back at my original instructor, and he actually passed away. I mean, he's one of like my best friends. He took me to tournaments. We went everywhere. He actually was the person that introduced me to like, if it wasn't for him, he gave me the opportunity to use my athletic ability. Yeah, which I feel like sometimes, a lot of the times, coaches and teachers try to take that away from kids because they want them to be what they want them to be. And he saw the athletic ability in me. That's why he showed me the flips and the tricks, and he opened up my mind to be able to go out there and push myself to the limits. His biggest thing was the fear of failure is the death of success.
Oh.
And that was a quote that's always lived in my life. Fear of failure, the death of success. So as a kid, I was always growing up thinking, I can't be scared to fail. I just got to continue to push through. I got to continue, and I just have to do it. So I learned a lot from him. And even as getting older, I was driving home the other day. And he had passed away from cancer, but before he passed away, he actually had built a martial arts studio at his house because he knew he had to close down his facility for his students to train in. And ultimately, I feel like a lot of that was for me too, because he knew I wasn't going to have a school to train at. And it's like, man, even like on his deathbed, he was still thinking about, what he was able to produce. And I mean, that's a true instructor, a true teacher, a true leader. So I learned a lot from that.
Wow, that's a lot of character, and that shows your character. I mean, I think it's pretty clear to anyone who's listening to this how much character you have. I think also I have a question for you about what is it that you're doing that seems to really carry over from your childhood that I'm noticing that you're bringing forward into martial athletes and possibly any other venue that's going on in your life.
Yeah, right now I feel like it's pushing the limits in terms of setting goals for myself and physically being able to reach them. So that's what I've been working. I'd say the last 5 years physically being able to reach it, but now it's kind of shifted to mentally being able to reach these goals. Because even I look back at that the other day too, right? And it's like when you really, I feel like now I'm starting to really understand myself. And what it's been able to take to get to where I am. And that started way before this. It's been years. For example, going from middle school sports, I feel like that work ethic that took me to get a black belt was able to give me that edge on those other kids when I started playing football and track and basketball, the coach didn't have to yell at me about getting extra effort. He didn't have to yell at me about pushing myself. He didn't have to yell at me about being disciplined, because I already had those aspects. And those things just kept on growing. And as I evolved in martial arts, as I continued to win world titles in martial arts, my athletic competition came up. And then I started looking back the other day as, man, I was a team captain in football. I was a track champion. I was a football champion. I was a leader on all these teams. And I was like, man, where did this come from? And it all rooted from my martial arts training.
Wow, and that seems like that's what you're bringing to, like today, like just tonight. It's a sparring seminar, but it was more than that. And just your presence there is definitely showing you building and bringing that structure to a lot of the youth that we're showing here.
Yeah, so, like I was saying too, like right now with the martial athletes, I feel like I'm finally coming to a whole, because now it's just not all physical, because it's not all about me. When it comes to the competition for the last few years, a lot of it's been physical. I've been able to rely on my athletic ability, but now when it comes down to being an instructor and being responsible for not just myself, but 50, 60 other students, I have to be mentally prepared too, right? So now it's me and my mental preparing practices. It might be meditation, reading, trying to read at least one book every month, journaling, paying attention to my feelings, my emotions. Once I started understanding it, now I can teach that to my kids. And that's kind of where I feel like sometimes in class, I get more into almost into a motivational speech sometimes. But I was even speaking to Carmichael the other day. Our word of the month is relentless.
You have a word of the month.
Hey, every month we do a word of the month, all right? And it's something that we work off of. So this month is relentless. It's crazy because I'd say 97% of my students didn't know what relentless means. And this is adults too, all right? But the fun, the most humbling part of it is my rookies class. These are 4 to 6 year olds. Of course, none of them knew what it was a week ago. I came back to them on Thursday of this week, and I swear half of my class could raise their hand and tell me what relentless means.
What does it mean?
Well, our quote last week on relentless was, all right, relentless is pushing yourself to that limit to where you want to give up, but you don't give up, and you continue to push through. All right, and it's not something that someone else has labeled. It's something that you have made up within yourself that you can push through and overcome. But I didn't just tell them. You can't just tell somebody. You have to physically let them overcome and become relentless. So what we did a plank test. I had them holding the plank. Some of them hold it 30 seconds. Some of them hold it 3 minutes. But they're shaking. And I'm physically back there telling them, this is relentless. If you want to give up, you can give up, but can you push yourself more? And then that connected in the heads. And then I got 5-year-old kids that can sit here and raise their hand and tell me, Coach, relentless means that if I get tired, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to push through. That is what martial arts is about, so being able to connect those two parts together now, and as an instructor, when I was growing up, I mean, my instructors were great, and they'd tell us some of these things, but sometimes it would kind of be left off to maybe some of the kids that just competed, or some of the kids that showed the most effort. But this is something that I feel like everybody can do. Everybody should be able to learn these aspects, and they're not learning it in school. And it's our job as instructors to be able to teach them that type of stuff inside the dojo. So that's one of the things that's really been inspiring me within the school.
Okay, wow. That is a lot. That's a mouthful. There's a lot of wonderful things to talk about and to continue talking about with this. Your background on motivation seems very clear as well, and it's powerful. So at this, we'll go ahead and keep it ahead at this moment, and we'll tune back in again for a third interview for even more information about your future and where you're going.
I can go all day. I can go all day, man.
Yeah, and the passion is infectious. Yeah,
it's infectious, and it's like, man, once you just got to step out there and make those moves. And even with the motivation, I'll just leave it at this. It's like, man, everybody has it in them. They have something in them that they can share, and it's like you just got to learn how to become comfortable in your own skin and with your abilities. And it's taken me a while, honestly, because I was able to express myself physically, and you have to learn how to do both.
Wow, and that sounds like that's what art in general is. All forms
Yes.
of art is about expression, isn't
It
it?
is about expression.
Wow. Okay.
Definitely.
Well, thank you very much for your time and
Perfect.
explaining some things to us.
Yes, sir.
And on that note, we'll go ahead and keep it ahead. Thank you very much again, and have a great night.
All right. Oosh.
Oos.
All right, watch this side right here. I want you to bounce. You're going to slide in.